Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting session by Digital Vidya. The topic for today's session is native advertising, changing digital advertising landscape. And for leading the session, we have Samir Tiwari, co-founder and CEO, Nonlinear. Samir was born in the software and technology sales environment 15 years back. Having worked both on-site and off-site across three continents, he has shifted to marketing world. In 2016, he stumbled upon digital marketing for the first time. He has worked with global and national clients like Zoom, Citibank, Microsoft, Cisco, Patanjali. He learned the insights of search, social, and media planning hands-on. In the last 11 years, Samir has been working with team size varying from 4 to 250 colleagues with intense emphasis on web and mobile publishing, media events, native content, programmatic marketing and affiliate marketing, market research, media buying, and media planning. Over the years, he has developed intrinsic knowledge of international, national, and vernacular digital space. Today, Samir will lead us through native advertising, and we all will have the round for Q&As after around 30 to 45 minutes of the presentation. Over to you, Samir, and welcome aboard.
Hey, Divya, thanks. Really appreciate you for your kind words. Hi, everyone. My name is Sameer Tibari, and I work for a company called Nonlinear. Um, Thanks to each one of you for taking time for registering and coming and joining the session, and a special appreciation for Digital Vidya and team for having me here to speak about the new trends of native advertising and how it is changing the digital advertising landscape. So, guys, I'm just trying to make sure that I try and make it interesting and with examples that you better understand. And just like how Divya said, we have a session in which we have question and answers in the end of this presentation. So I'd love for you to just feel free and ask anything that you want to cover in this particular discussion. So just to begin with, I wanted to tell you what are the contents of this particular webinar. See, what we are trying to establish here is we're just trying to get people introduced to what is native advertising. I'm sure a lot of you would already know what is native advertising, but what we're trying to do out of this exercise here is we're trying to get people introduced to native advertising, showing them examples, taking you guys through the different kinds of monetization opportunities for publishers, advertisers, how they are leveraging the native advertising opportunity in getting their money in rolling, right? So beyond that, what we're also going to do is we're going to talk about what is a comparison in between a typical banner ad, something which you see as a conventional ad, which is bang on your face when you just visit a website, compared to how do you experience a native ad. What's exactly the difference, why do people react differently, and what have been the results from looking at the trends globally of how the users behave to these two kinds of ads, so banner ads and native ads. And then we're going to talk about the performance tracking. Obviously, each technology has got KPIs attached to it. So we're going to look at what are the performance parameters and metrics that we are doing we're looking at the tangibility of the native ads. Beyond that, I think it's always important that we look at not only the advantages of a particular technology or new aspect of advertising, but I think it's also important that we look at what challenges do advertisers and what challenges do native platforms face, and what are the different threats they have when all of this is being presented to a user who's coming onto the advertiser's website. Now, also, just to sum up the session in the end, what we're going to do is we will look at the global trends. And why I've taken global trends is because the Western world is a more mature market when we talk about native and content advertising, whereas India is catching up very fast. I can tell you that for sure. But yeah, there's a huge scope of for us to reach the standards which have been set by countries like US, something what they do in Europe, and something which is already being implemented in places like Singapore. And in the end, I'll just finish it off, guys. I'm going to just put a cherry on the end of it by talking about who are the top players in the native space. So let's just gear up and get started. I'm going to take you and just to understand it better, what exactly is native. Let's just forget about advertising for a moment and let's just talk about what is native. Now, native is something when you say, I am a native of a particular state in India, right? So in advertising, anything that is resident or which is present in a very natural form of function on the advertising website or on the advertising forum, or it may be print or anything for the matter of fact, that's called native. Something which looks local to the environment of your advertising domain is what you call native, right? But just for you to read it, we can say it's a form which is married by function. So native ads match the visual design of the advertising experience, and then they must behave consistently with the native user experience. It should not appear that it just fell from somewhere. I understand it's not easy to define it at one go. So what I'm going to do is I will show you an example. Take a look at these images carefully. What do you see common in these images? If you look at any one of them, what you definitely see, and I'm sure you guys might have used or come across this word called camouflage, right? So what is happening in all of these cases is these animals have a camouflage with their background. They're natively present in that particular environment. So what happens is in a typical banner ad scenario, I'm sure each one of you would have experienced it. You go onto a website, you're planning to read news, or you're trying to look at the scoreboard, or let's say you're trying to make a purchase, you're gonna plan to buy a bag or something, and then suddenly out of nowhere this banner ad pops up. It interrupts the experience of the user. Now, how do we counter, or how do we solve this particular problem where the user is unable to see what he came for, and there is something which is being forced on him, right? I'm not an enemy of the banner ad space. I belong to that world. I actually come from there. But then the technology is evolving in a way that it is imperative for the advertisers to consider a fact, just like these three images. Why can't we give our users a space which is spontaneous, which is marrying the background, and it doesn't interrupt with their journey on your website? Okay, now I'm going to move into the example slide, and I'm sure each one of us using the mobile maybe 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day must have come across something like this. Why don't you take a look at the one on the left? It's talking about the sponsored ads, and the one which says the new age of discovery. It's promoted by Land Rover, which is the second example. Let's take a look at the connected car CES. It says powered by Intel. So all of these are examples of native advertising on the mobile platform. Now, just for convenience, I've taken a simple example. There are many other which are complex, but let's not get onto that. What you will very clearly notice here is that the environment you see when you're reading when you're reading the auto news, so you're talking about what GM is doing, 2014 Chevrolet, so on and so forth, and then suddenly something comes out and it says new age discovery. So it's not interrupting with the experience of the user, rather it is giving the user a chance to read something in the body of the advertiser's website, right? Or a news website, or a, let's say, or a finance website. I'm going to show you a couple more examples. Just take a look at these, and then I'll take you to some live examples and let you do that on your own. You see that SUV ad? All right, I'm sure you must have seen all of this. I'm just going to flip through, and I'm going to take you into something which is more real time, guys. I'm sure each one of us is reading news every day, and this is the Times of India website, guys. And I just wanted to show you a live example of native ad because I'm sharing screen. I'm sure each one of you can see this. You see, this is a native ad, this one right here. It doesn't look very different from what has been posted here as a news. You know, it's marrying the content. Now if we just go and click the GL Bajaj Institute ad, it'll lead you into something where you see this ads columbiaonline.com. Now that's a platform which Times of India has for itself. It's a native platform. Now just going back, I'm going to show you another example here, guys. Let's look at the health section. All of us are very kicked about being healthy and maintaining our bodies. Let's just click on this particular one where it says how this woman lost this 25 kgs. And once you get there, what you really see is an example of a lady who's made it happen. And then as you scroll down, you're reading through the story. Please look at the right side of the pane. Take a look at this. Promoted stories. This is an example of native ads. Do you see this? Get unlimited access to CBIL score at just 386 per month. Get term cover. Now this doesn't really, it's not a hindrance to your journey while you're reading this. It's something which comes in between, and it pitches itself in a very subtle way, and you can very well read it has been recommended by Columbia, which I just told you about. So guys, these are the actual examples of the native advertising, and I just showed you what happens on mobile and desktop. I'm going to show you some examples from the tab. Take a look at this. It's selling SUV. It's talking about McAfee. Then there's some acidity free ad. So each place that you notice, it'll be something like promoted by, sponsored by. These are examples. And I'm sure once you go back, you take a look at your most favorite website, and I'm sure you'll see hundreds of such examples which you may have clicked in the past, maybe noticed, maybe not noticed, right? So it'll be great if you can consciously click these ads and see how do they behave. Now I was just coming onto this, and I believe I already gave you an example of what is the disclosure language, because when you're doing native advertising, what you're not trying to do at the same time is you're not trying to trick the user to click on your ad just by doing or hiding something where it doesn't point out clearly that it is an ad, right? Otherwise, it's not an ethical practice. So normally across the world, which is being followed at this time, we need this kind of a nomenclature or phrases. It says, I'm sure you would have experienced all of this. You might like elsewhere from around the web. I'm sure once you're on Facebook, or let's say you're buying stuff from e-commerce websites, I'm sure you're going to see a lot of elsewhere from around the world. And when you're on news websites, it'll say from around the web. And specifically, let's just talk about where the actual transactions are happening. Ticket bookings, e-commerce websites, IRCTC, which is the largest e-commerce website in our country in particular, where the maximum amount of money transaction happens. You'll see something which is called "you may have missed," right? So these are ads which they don't come onto your screen as a hindrance or something which is stopping your journey through reading what you really went to consume on a particular website, but these are suggestions. These are ideas which are in a very in a manufactured way, being presented to you, so that if you are interested in something like that, you may go and click on it. Let me just take the example of sponsored by or recommended for you. Imagine yourself studying about how do whales live their lives in the ocean, right? And if I suddenly somewhere show you an ad which is talking about what kind of jet fighters did India buy, and the government is doing such a brilliant job by buying those jet fighters, I don't see any parity in between what you're reading. You're reading about the life cycle, or how interestingly the whales live in the ocean, but you have nothing to do at that time reading about what the government is doing for the ordinance or for your defense of your country, right? So it's imperative. It has to be planned in a way. It has to be the ad. The technology should marry the content which the user is reading on the website, so that the probability, or let's say the chances, that this particular user belonging to a particular reading genre is going to click on that ad just because it is something which is related to what he's trying to find. Example, you're on an e-commerce website trying to buy a sports watch, okay? And if this guy, so there is high probability that you have a knack for sports, or let's say swimming, or so on and so forth. If these guys, if the advertiser is able to show you a couple of ads which is talking about swimwear, or let's say machines which are health, something like a healthometer, there's high probability that you're going to click it, right? Now, let's just quickly move out of this, and I'm just showing you another example. Sponsored by Outbrain, sponsored content by Taboola. These are all technology providers who do that. All right, let's just flip for a moment and dive a bit deeper and see, what are the different kinds of native ads you might just encounter while surfing through your mobile, or let's say your desktop. Now, in-feed native ads, pretty simple. It's very much, it looks like the content of the advertiser's website. It links to a page where the site is like an editorial story. It will come to you as if it is an editorial piece on the website, and it is sold with a guaranteed placement. So the advertiser is going to tell you, see, so if you let's say the publisher is going to tell you, if you are the advertiser, the publisher can actually come back to you and say, I'm going to give you a position on this particular page at this scroll, so that your user able to see it 3 times in a day. So you can actually get guarantees placements, and the buyer knows exactly, the advertiser knows exactly what context will it surround, what is the subject, all of that. And it's typically measured on brand metrics, such as how's the user interacting, what is the brand lift. I'm going to show you all of those examples as we move forward. Let's take a look at another kind of ad, native ad. Now, I'm sure almost each one of you have experienced this while searching through the net. These are paid search ads, and these are promoted listings. You could normally see this right above the organic results which you get on your search engine pages, and it's a very it's mostly, you see it in the form of text ads or small image ads. And how the agency knows and measures it is, it's measured by the conversion metrics, such as how many clicks did it get, how many purchases did the user make while it came to the publisher's website, and all of this data is being given to the advertiser on a regular basis, right? That's how the technology works. So it's a clear system talking about what did you spend, how many clicks did you get, how many users came, how many of them registered, and ultimately how many of them bought. That's an example. I'm sure each one of us going onto an e-commerce purchase would have seen. Promoted listings are found on sites that are typically do not have a traditional editorial content. Who has a traditional editorial content? A news website has a traditional editorial content. Let's say an informative website, an educational website has a traditional editorial content, whereas you can't expect an e-commerce website to have an editorial content of its own, what is it going to talk about, right? It's ultimately it's just the products that you're selling. So now, how do we measure these? How do we measure the performance of these promoted listings? They're bought on auction directly. Normally, in cases, the publisher doesn't guarantee the placement of these ads, but these are again measured on direct response metrics, like for example, clicks, registrations, or maybe conversions, right? So again, easily calculated, and the advertiser has a clear recon of what he's spending versus what people are buying from him. Now, custom content units, I mean, it's gotten quite advanced. There are custom content units which could be let's say video units. It largely depends on how flexible or how technologically advanced the publisher is. So you have a platform, and then you decide that there is a case of custom playlist that you want to show, and in between you want to do a custom unit which is like a video unit of a famous singer performing, and then you've got a couple of ads where you're selling let's say Bose music systems, right, which is related to the category which the viewer is looking at. So, I mean, there is no dearth of what innovation or creativity which you can bring in custom content units. But yeah, there are two things important on the publisher side. One, there should be clear understanding of how does your user behave. Two, you should be technologically capable of tying each thread in place so that in nowhere during the user's journey of your website do you lose the behavioral patterns. Which page did he arrive at? Did he come from search? Did he directly type your website? Did he come from the social platform? And what did he do? How many pages did he read? Where are the pages? What are the different topics where he's more interested? And there is a possibility of this guy clicking on a particular offering while he's done reading that particular topic. Yeah. So all of these, I mean, this ultimately comes out of experience, and there's a lot of UI which is involved in this. But I think this is going to be a future. I'm not going to show you a lot of examples in the interest of time, but maybe that as we have more and more sessions, we can do that. User response, native versus banner ads, humongous difference. Let's just look at what happens when a user looks at a banner ad which is being flashed onto him while he visits a particular domain versus a native ad. So it says, and now this particular, it's a global study, and it says consumers looked at native ads 52% more frequently than banner ads, just like how we were talking about. More intel to this, 25% more consumers were measured to look at in-feed native ad placements rather than standard banners. Like I said, standard banners are more pushed in marketing or pushed in advertising, whereas these, they are a more organic form of, or let's say a more planned form of the advertising bit. The other one says more said that the native ad is an ad I would like to share with a friend or a family member, which means that when when you're looking at a banner ad, you just look at it, you close it, but the probability that you're going to share it on, let's say, on your Facebook or Twitter or Instagram is less likely as compared to something that you've been showing as a native ad. Now, look at this. It says more of who previously bought a product from an advertiser. They said they personally identify with the brand after viewing a native ad. So what happens is when you're looking at a native ad, you see that ad on a page which is related to the category of what is being sold, and there is high probability you've consumed a lot of data about it. For example, you're buying a watch, you already read so much, what is the make, what is the price, who's normally wearing, who's endorsing it, so on and so forth. The probability of you converting as a user or a buyer increases. Consumers looked at the native ad more than the other. All right, let's just skip it. And yeah, this is something which you want to take a look at. Consumer looked at the original editorial content and native ads for a similar amount of time. Can you believe it? Now, if a user is spending, let's say, around 1.2 minutes on a on an editorial content, there is high probability that he's still giving 1 minute to a native ad, which is very high. And you know, normally what happens on a banner ad, right? There is high probability the users close it just on a maybe just in a couple of seconds. I'll just move further. And guys, I'm going to talk about something which is very important, both from the advertiser's perspective, because he's spending money on various kinds of ads. So let's say if there is a pie of how much he's going to spend on banner ads versus how much is he going to spend on native ads. These are the performance tracking metrics. So time spent, let's say you have an ad which says sponsored by, user goes, clicks on it, closes it in just 3 seconds. It's not worth, right? Then you're not doing the right kind of native. Maybe that the content is not good enough for the user to consume. So, all of this data, specifically, most important metrics is time spent. How much time, until and unless your user is spending time on looking at, reading, or let's say if it is a video or images, there is very less probability that he's going to do transaction with you. Similarly, said in another fashion, attention in minutes, what all pages he's looking at, how long is he scrolling. Social shares is very important. If you share something which you like very much or maybe dislike very much, right? So it's on both sides. So in this case, when you're talking about a transaction, you normally tend to share a particular let's say a product which you saw and you found that it'll be worthy for your network to see it, buy it, or use it. Now, social following and referral traffic is something which is very important, because all of us as people, we follow different things. Somebody likes tasting tea. Somebody wants to bike around on a weekend. Somebody is a book reader. The other people want to do a historic place visit or something. So what happens is what you're doing out of native advertising is you're putting people in different buckets. Yeah, you're putting your users in different buckets, and you're saying that for a particular bucket, I'm going to show only these set of ads. So for a fitness bucket, I'm going to show them probably green teas, which can help them lose weight, or probably barometers of health, which can measure their steps. For a bucket which is more interested in reading, you're talking about to them about new releases of books, so on and so forth. So it's very important, you have to bucket and you have to segregate properly before you go ahead and show an ad. Comments, what do people write about your ad? Demographics, definitely, what age category, male, female, what level of, what metrics of annual income, all of these taken into account is important, because ultimately you're not just doing a native ad for once, but you're going back to the same audience, rinsing it properly, and then doing a remarketing, right? So the people who were interested, who clicked, I'm sure you would have experienced, you went to buy an Indigo ticket from Delhi to Bombay. You didn't take that decision right then. You went on to then, you closed that particular window. You went on to another website. You were looking at the cricket score, or let's say you were looking at something else, and suddenly this small ad pops up. That's called I'm sure a lot of you know, it's a remarketing or a retargeting ad, right? So why it is happening with you is because you have been put in a bucket of people looking to book tickets online, right? It's as simple as that. Then we're looking something called as page views, just like I told you, So this guy comes onto your website, he clicks on your native ad, he looks at 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. What does that sound to you? He's interested. He wants to read about the service or the product and wants to know more. So the probability of this user converting into a prospect and then to a customer is very high. Click-through rate, pretty simple. You divide the number of clicks by the number of times, which we normally call the number of impressions, and then multiply it by 4. So you say these many people who clicked on my ad, these many times my ad was shown So I'm going to divide the clicks by the number of times shown, multiply it by 100, and come on to a click-through rate. Higher the click-through rate, better the campaign is performing, which is the case of both a native and a banner ad, right? All right. What are experts tracking? Let's just talk about what do the what are the top metrics among what we just saw here. Traffic, 60% use traffic to prove native effectiveness, followed closely by audience engagement, 58%, and then time spent. I think that's very logical, right? You're talking about posting a native ad. So the first calibration you're going to do is how many people clicked on that ad and arrived to my website as a traffic. Second, what was the engagement, which obviously involves, how many pages they've been reading, how long they've been around, and so on and so forth. So that covers engagement and time spent. But what is also very important and being tracked very closely, especially on the social platforms, is sharing. How many of the people who looked at your ad read it completely, but did they really share it with, let's say, their colleagues or people who are interested in same topics? That's a larger question. So these are the metrics, brand awareness, so on and so forth. These are other facts, but traffic, engagement, time spent, and sharing. I think four of these are the top-notch ones. I'll let you read that on your own. Written content. Why is it important? See, you can write a content about a particular topic, but until unless it is something which gives a clear perspective to your user about what he came looking out for, he's not going to stay with you for too long. It happens with all of us, right? You go on to do a search, and or probably you are on a website, and then you see a couple of ads. Something which is related to what you were looking for is where exactly you want to reside for a longer time, right? So written content, layout because of user experience and user, the way the user behaves. Video content is also very important and it's catching up very fast because more of the people want to listen to stories in a video format these days. It's followed by multimedia storytelling, so on and so forth. Let me move on to the next one here. Challenges. Yeah. So, like we said, we're not just going to look at the advantages, but we're also going to talk about the challenges. So, I think it says that almost half of the total audience, which is around 45% of news media publishers, have a challenge of explaining the difference of a native advertising versus a banner ad to besides their editorial to the users. So how distinct can you make your native recommended by, but beyond that, how well is it placed? The other challenge which very clearly the publishers face, and I'm sure a lot of you listening here who belong to the publishing community would be nodding your heads. Advertisers many times if I'm not sure and if I'm we talk about that. I don't think any advertiser would, right? So it's always good for an advertiser that great, everybody wants to market, have a great shop. So if you're telling stories, do that with honesty. If you've got 10 great stories to tell, also tell your users or maybe that create content in which you had a user who had a problem of getting it on time. How did you go about resolving it? Why not have a story like that? None of us are perfect, right? None of the businesses around the world are perfect. So why don't we take a case in which the user did not have a great experience? The shop goes back to the user, says, I'm going to help you with your problem. And here's the story. Why don't you tell us what happened? And then you resolve the problem and then you show a real life story to your consumers. I think that is more reassuring than just singing great songs about what you do, right? The other thing which normally, I'm going to wrap this up in 5 minutes now, which normally is a challenge is training sales team. I think that is something my my partners digital Vidya would really want to raise their hands and come up with something, or we collaborate and we come up with something. How do you go about training people in selling native ads? Everybody, I'm sure, in the industry is now well versed and an expert with selling banner ads. You've got impact ads, you've got Christmas, so there is a big ad with Santa Claus selling something to the audience, but how do you write a story about who was Santa Claus, and then you make the user interested in reading it, and then you then land up and tell him that why don't you become a Santa for your office, or let's say your children at home. So that tactic of selling the native space is something which is evolving. We are all learning, and like I said, our market is very fast evolving, but there's a huge scope for us to learn that. I just moved fast on this one. Threats is pretty similar to what we saw as challenging. Poor client understanding. You come up with a native ad unit, beautifully looking. It's got a video, talks about great things about, or real things about your advertiser. The advertiser is not able to connect. He goes back, he tells the publisher, why don't you just show a normal, simple ad to my users? Whereas the advertiser doesn't understand, with all due respect at this time, that the user has transformed in many ways. He's not going to take a flashy ad for a buying decision making. Yeah, he wants to read, he wants to consume, he wants to understand, assimilate, and then after a lot of price comparing is when he's going to buy that. So it's the threat is that even if you put so much effort into creating and publishing native ads, the challenge always lies on how do you go about selling it to the advertiser. These are a few of the trends. How do you label? I think we've already spoken about it. 60% of these native ads that you're going to see, they'll say sponsored content. You'll see advertisement in few of the places. You can see that graph. The sad part is if you read something here in the presentation, but a disturbing 7% do not label native advertising at all. This is the challenge which the industry is going, it's really facing this challenge. And I can bet you this is not 7%. This is way more than that. How do we audit this particular percentage? It is imperative as publishers and especially looking at the ethical means of selling a particular ad to your user, it is imperative that we label it. Now, if it is not happening, we are tricking the user into a camouflaged environment where he doesn't know if he is reading from the editorial, is it real content, or is he being led by the publisher into a zone where his possibility of buying a particular product increases, which is not organic, right? Which is inorganic, which is not ethical. So it is important that there is an audit body, which and there is one, not one, but quite a few of them. We can talk about it in the webinars to come. So that bit of fraud has to be looked at very carefully, and then I'll leave you with some thought. Half of the consumers have no idea what native advertising is. I'm not talking about you, me, and our colleagues and friends from the marketing world. I'm sure a lot of you are supermarketeers yourself, so you understand that. But the consumer side, half of them, or maybe more, they don't understand native advertising. It makes a difference. 3 out of 4 publishers offer some form of native advertising on their sites. 90% of the publishers either have plans to launch native advertising campaigns or already in the way of doing it, right? So there is a huge scope. There is no doubt that this bit can grow, but there needs to be an organic growth to native advertising, given the nature of this particular technology. You can't just force the user to buy you. Top technology platforms, I'm sure a lot of you already know, but just for all of us to just revisit, we got Outbrain, Taboola, mainly if you're looking at the Indian market, I see redirect coming in quite fast in our markets, but I don't know the exact market share right now. Maybe in the in the following webinars we are able to come and define who's the top and why is it top. See, I can tell you for sure, all of these guys are providing the platform. It's largely similar, but why a particular platform stands apart could be different. An Outbrain could have a larger set of publishers. A Taboola could have a more skewed set of publishers which can be easily defined. A redirect could be doing something altogether different, which is making it easier for the advertiser to see where is money being spent. And I'm talking hypothetically at this time because I don't want to confuse you. So each platform has its own merits and demerits. So we'll explore it as we move further. But at this time, in the interest of keeping up with Divya's clock, I'm going to leave you with some thought, and over to you, Divya.
Thanks, Samir. We shall open the round for Q&As. Everyone, you can put in your questions in the question panel on the right-hand side, and we'll share out the recording and the presentation with you after the session. You'd receive these by email maybe by Tuesday, so don't worry about these two things. And just we have got a few of the questions. I'll read out the questions for you. While everyone else is putting in their question, I'll also launch out a poll for people who are interested in a digital marketing course. Just select an option whichever suits you if you are interested in the course or if you are already participating. So we got a few questions. The very first question is, how do we place native ads in a particular site? For Times Now, they have their own platform which helps advertisers to do it. How about some other smaller sites who rely on platforms like AdSense to place ads in their site?
Thank you, Divya. Well, I can see Shri asking that particular question, and I'm sorry, I can see a lot of you being troubled by the voice quality. I can see a few questions on the top, but my apologies for that. But just to answer what Shri is asking, Shri, when you're specifically talking about Times Now, they already have something like Columbia, which is helping them do their native ad site. But when you're talking about the other smaller sites like the publishers, they have basically what they've done is, see, even I come from a publishing background in the last 5 years, so I can tell you for sure that there are proactive publishers who are partnering with other platforms, technology platforms like Outbrain, Taboola, and many of them, and they're a part of the offering of these platforms. So let's say if an advertiser, I'm just for the namesake, I'm just taking an example of Outbrain. Now let's say if a publisher has partnered with Outbrain, and it's not a very big site, it's getting like 2 million unique visitors in a month, and they partnered. So what happens is Outbrain is able to offer the presence to the advertiser on this particular publisher website, right? So he's going to tell the advertiser that, see, I can give you placements around this kind of a scroll or these locations of native ads on your website. So who to partner, whether if it is AdSense, whether if it is an Outbrain or if it is a Taboola, it's at the choice of the publishing side. But largely, what needs to be considered is what I showed you on the KPI front. What are the parameters when when you decide when you want to partner? Accuracy, let's say on KPIs, or how is it being reported back to you? That is a choice a publisher has to make. I hope it was answered. Over to the next one, please.
The next question is by Vikas. How is Korra a place for native advertising?
Well, that's a very good question because now Quora is something. Why do you really go to Quora? One of the reasons of why do you get these emailers from Quora? Now, it's a Q and A place, right? It's talking about, so you have a question, you go type it off, and you start getting answers. Now, when you're having a question, I'm sure you'll agree with me, Vikas, that you already have told the other side what category are you talking about. So let's say if I was searching for how many users visit Forbes.com on a particular day, or let's say in a month, which largely implies that there is a possibility that I'm looking at advertising on Forbes.com or similar sites because of which I'm asking this question. So it puts me into a bucket. Now, when it puts me into a bucket, what it really enables the advertiser is to segment me as a user, and it says that this guy largely can be a marketing guy with some budget with him. Now, on the other side, if I am asking a question about organizing a party, a house party, then it opens another window, puts me into another bucket, saying, here's a person who wants to do a house party in this place. Let's look at suggesting ads from event organizers, or let's say birthday party or whatever kind of a party organizers to this guy. So there is a high probability that he's going to click on it. So it's more of profiling. So you're talking about Quora. Quora already has done a good bit of profiling basis the questions that you ask, and then it'll show you relevant ads, native ads of your interest. I hope it somewhat gets you uh, to what you asked.
Thanks, Amir. Next question has been actually asked by multiple people,
Mhm.
Priyanka, Ashish, and some other as well. So they want to know about how costing works at native advertising and how is it different from the banner ads running on Google AdWords.
Yeah, that is one aspect we must any advertiser. I'm sorry, any guy looking at partnering for a native would look at. Priyanka, to answer your question in a very simple way, the native, see what the native is giving to you is if it is in a form of text. Let's just answer how incremental the native advertising costs are. If you're looking at a text native ad, that is the lowest cost native ad you can find. If you're looking at involving images, it is the second level of it. If you're looking at having a video native ad which has a story in it, it is the third level of highest cost as far as native is concerned. But given your question about what is the difference of the cost in native and other ad forms like banner ads, impact ads, or let's say pre-roll ads in videos, a banner ad is normally costlier than a native ad. I'm not saying in all cases, but in a majority of cases, an impact buy, for example, if you go to, let's say, Scoop Whoop, for example, and on a particular day, an insurance company has taken the page takeover ad on Scoop. So the cost that this particular advertiser pays is higher because the first thing that the user is coming and looking at on the website is not the content of the website but the ad which is being pushed to him. So in a lot of cases there is a probability that the user clicks on it, he reaches to the landing page, and hence the conversion increases. Whereas for a native ad, the user needs to be an intrinsic reader so that he arrives to a place where this native ad exists, and by the virtue of him being an intrinsic reader, he clicks on this particular ad. So in larger cases, the banner ads they cost you more, whereas the native ads are more relevant to the profiling of the user.
Thanks, Amir. Next question is by Suryakant. He is asking, In banner ads too, we have option of showcasing ads or videos by choosing placements, demographic, interest, etc. So how is native ads more effective comparatively?
Definitely. Suryakant, you do have a choice of, targeting your ad placements, like I showed you in those in-feed ad example. So when you receive the presentation on your email, I would request you to please go and look at the various form ads examples that I've shared with you. Yes, you can choose the placement, not in all cases of native ads, but depending on what kind of native ad are you buying, you can choose the placement. You can look at slicing, dicing, and focusing by selecting the demographic of the audience that you're looking at, because I'm sure you will not be selling let's say a sari to a guy who's an engineer and is working in the oil and natural gas field, who's a male, right? So he's a male who's an engineer working as in the oil and natural gas domain, will not buy a sari. Maybe he buys it for his wife, but large possibility he will not wrap it around himself, right? So you can do a demographic targeting. You can do an interest targeting, just like how I gave an example to Priyanka about profiling of the customers, and what Vikas had asked about Korra. So interest is another aspect you're looking at. But please remember, going back to Priyanka's question again, and answering this particular bit, that more targeted your ads become, just like in the case of banner ads, the higher you pay for your ad, right? So to reach the effective audience for each unit of your ad, or let's say each impression of your ad, you're going to pay more for that. I hope that answers it well.
Thanks, Amir. Tulika's question is, aren't ads supposed to stand out from the page in which they are placed? By standing out, I don't mean that they should be flashy, but is camouflaging ads is a good content idea when the ad goes unnoticed?
Yeah, that's largely correct, Vikas, and that is one of the not very good things about native ad. You rightly pointed it out, because what happens is, when you're looking at the environment of a website and you've got editorial content on there, if it is a subject which not necessarily interests you, there is a possibility that you may not click on that native ad, because it is married to the background of the website, right? The publisher hasn't done something largely different to make it look different. But so that's a disadvantage. Yes, you're right. But on the other side, if you're looking at the authenticity of an ad being placed in a section where the user has a high probability of going, let's say and FIFA is coming and I'm a soccer fan. So there is a scoreboard widget on your website, and a lot of the users go there, and then what you're doing there is you're showing him an ad of let's say jerseys of a particular team, which country team, which the user may follow, or let's say giving them an option to choose buying jerseys of different country teams. So there is where, I mean, it all depends. Yes, there is a disadvantage that this ad doesn't look very different from the environment, but because it doesn't look very different from the environment, only the interested users are going to research, read, and then click on it, right? So you're losing on a lot of it, but at the same time, whoever you're getting is a more qualified lead for you. I hope you understand the word qualified lead. Over to the next one, please.
Next question is by Manpreet. Are programmatic buying and native ads similar in nature?
Yeah, Manpreet, not necessarily. See, because a programmatic buy is a larger set. By doing a programmatic buying, you could be showing a user both a banner ad and a native ad, right? So what you're doing is you're taking a particular budget from the advertiser, and you're saying that I'm going to show all of these budgets on different websites, which I do not necessarily guarantee you a placement. but the way a banner ad, which is being which is being published by a programmatic engine, is still going to be a banner ad. It will not have something called as sponsored by, featured by, or recommended by. Whereas a native ad, like I told you in the earlier part of the presentation, Manpreet, is going to have these suggestive phrases which will differentiate it from a banner ad. So a programmatic buying can have both banner ads and native ads in it.
Thanks, Samir. Next question is by Manish. He wants to know what are the career options in native advertising and can a person become a freelancer in the same?
Sure. Manish, you see, the last couple of slides that we were reading is indicating very clearly that a large side of the publishers want to have a native ad, being shown on their website. 90% of them, like we just read. So yes, it is something which can become a career option depending on how deep you want to really go and dive in it. It is a growing industry in our country and a fast growing industry. Now, I wish I had a slide where I could show you a trend, how it has evolved from 2013 until today. Let's say 2013, 14 until today, a 5 yearly trend. But what I can tell you with complete conviction is that native ad is something which will be having an organic growth. It will not just grow in leaps and bounds immediately, but definitely in the digital ad space, native ad is going to have a very large chunk of share as we move forward towards 2025. That I can rest assure you. About your freelancing question, yes, definitely, Manish. Depending on what knowledge we acquire about this particular topic, and more importantly, who are we serving? So, are we helping the advertiser buy native ads in a more efficient way, or are you helping the publisher through your skills sell the native ads in a more efficient way? So you could be doing, either you could be helping the publisher or you could be helping the advertiser, or let's say you have a knowledge of both sides and you come and tell both sides that I'm going to help you sell your inventory and you buy the inventory at a lower cost and the most relevant inventory. So there is tremendous scope. There is undoubtedly tremendous scope in this field. That I can rest assure you.
Great. Next question is by Mohit. He
Sure.
wants to know how do we decide if it is the right time to get into native advertising for a brand? Can you share some examples from your past experience?
Mohit, that's something where I would suggest that there is no defined time to get into a native advertising mode. I think it should start from day one. So if you have a website which is building upon users coming in, let's say you have a finance domain website like I'll give you an example. Let's say if you own mutual funds, which is now growing very fast, okay? My suggestion as a marketer would be that you must have a healthy mix of advertisers who are not only doing large size impact banner ads with you, but you must always, right since the beginning when you're forming this website, partner with a native platform so that people who are ardent readers of your website are able to leverage these native ads, because I can bet you for one thing that people who are very carefully reading each bit or let's say page or section of your website, they are your real retained users. They are the people who will actually do transactions there, and they are the people whom you want to show maximum content, which implies that you should have native advertising right since the beginning. Could share a few examples from the past. I wish I could show you, but I can name a few of the websites, just like BuzzFeed, Scoop. These guys, they've been very proactive, Mohit. They've been doing it right since the beginning, and they're doing it right. Do
Thanks,
we have
Renuka.
time? Do we?
Yeah, we'll take up few questions quickly.
Sure. Would
Um,
love to. Yeah.
yep. Next question is does native advertising works on Facebook and other platform, or is it just for publishers?
No, it works with Facebook. If you go to Facebook, I think in one of the slides I was just speaking. This is Shiba who's asked this question, right? Shiba, this is possible on Facebook. I am not sure if you really had a keen eye on looking at. So the moment we end this conversation, probably just go and see. Facebook itself sends you a lot of recommendations. I'm sure that's native to Facebook, but you will also have recommended ads on Facebook. If you have a habit of, let's say, if you shop on Amazon and you are logging in through your Facebook, it gives you an option, right? It says you can log in from your Gmail or Facebook. It makes it easier and for the platform to identify you, your choices. And yes, it shows you native ads on Facebook. You just got to have a key eye on detail for ads next time you're there. Try that after this one.
Thank you. Next question is by Renuka. She wants to know that Google AdWords have their own list of websites which help us display ads. How do we
Mhm.
get specific websites in native advertising?
Renuka, a large percentage of the websites that you'll see on Google AdWords, it is you'll also see a repetition on the native ad platforms because when you're talking about, let's say, the news domain, okay, you have just so many websites which have more than 5 million users, unique visitors coming on a particular month. So it can be targeted through Google Ads where you're doing you have a set of, let's say, 1,000 or a lakh websites, and then it can also be targeted by a native platform. But what you'll notice if you're on the advertising side, or even if you have ever tried or you want to do a research, is that a large part of these websites, I think around 60% in my experience, are common because it's the same world. You see, it is the same world of advertisers, publishers, which exists for us. So there are experts with news, there are experts with finance, sports, technology. It's a mix of maybe a couple of lakh websites. There is an
Thank
overlap,
you.
very strong overlap.
Thank you. Next question is by Gitanjali. She thinks that she wants to know your opinion that in the near future, banner ads will. Do you think that in the near future, banner ads would be almost nullified and be taken over by native ads, or is there any specific preferences for banner ads?
That's a fantastic question, Gitanli. It takes me back at least 10 years, and now there was always a question, and there is it still is, that is digital going to take over print completely? Your question is pretty similar and interesting in the same regard. Gitanjali, these ad patterns are there to coexist, and we don't know what technology will come, which will, yes, definitely native ad is going to grow for sure, because given the nature of the profiling it does, the content which is there, but I don't see it completely taking over and nullifying the banner side of ads. Because if I'd be saying that, I don't think it is the right assumption to make by a marketer, and I don't see that happening completely. Whereas what's going to happen for sure is that today you have something called as native ads. Tomorrow there'll be another technology which will be so qualified in terms of the user behavior, and it's going to track the user's behavior by the movement of the eyeballs. And it is already happening. I can tell you in the ad world that there are new things coming in which can actually tell you, which can actually tell the advertiser the kind of website a user flips on a particular day, how long does he stay on which website, how long or which page he visits, or what transaction does he make. So all that data is already happening, and all of this advertising is going to get very, very skewed. The advertiser is very evolved these days. Earlier, an advertiser who used to spend a crore rupees in an advertising campaign would only ask you one question: how many people saw my ad? It doesn't happen in the present environment anymore. So what the advertiser has evolved, and it's good for the industry that they come back and ask us how many times my ad was clicked, how many leads did I derive out of this effort, and what was my per transaction cost. So all of this is going to stay, but the better technology, which has a better tangibility, is going to win in the end.
Thank you. Next question is by Shri and Suryakant both. How is the costing works at um, native advertising, as in which model works? CPC, CPM, CPA?
All of them, all of them. You have a choice to select among any of these models, and essentially, like I said, when you're talking about views, then you buy a click at a higher. It's just like, so when you're looking at this costing, the more you graduate in terms of getting closer to the user, the cost increases. You have all of these options in there. There
Thank
may be
you.
a platform which may be providing it. Two of these, let's say CPC and CPM, may not be doing a CPA, but then there are competitive platforms who do all three of these. So yeah, it all can be done.
Thank you. Next question is by Stephen. How do we push native ad segment by business model or services to different targeted demographics and obtain click-through report which companies and technology companies provide, such as service agencies?
This question is by who, Divya? I'm sorry, I could not understand
Stephen.
that. Stephen,
Stephen.
I'm just trying to look his question on the platform. Ah, there you are, Stephen. How do we push segmented by business model, which company tech was? All right, Stephen. Yeah, that's a great question to ask. So, like I said, you or me, or let's say anyone as a user, has a certain behavioral patterns when we come onto the internet IOTA, right? So, I may be looking at news, more specifically financial news. You may be looking at sports, live sports streaming. Somebody else could be looking at Bollywood news. The fourth person could be looking at, let's say, science and research and development. So what happens is, when you talk about how do we segment these by business, it's very simple. The largest, let's say, or the most common method is, you identify the IP of your user, right? So you know that when this IP comes in, he's going to do this particular activity. Is he going to some specific website? Now, basis that, you do a profiling, and when you do a profiling further, you're also able to understand what net income group could this particular user belong to. So whether do you sell a car worth 10 lakhs to him, or whether do you sell something like a Mercedes 4matic which is 60 lakhs above, it's all basis, what the user has been consuming, buying, visiting on the internet IOTA. Yes, agencies have a segregation of such demographics, and in fact non-linear, which is my own company, does that. So most important is profiling, and how do you about segregating who to show what.
Thanks, Amir. With this, I would like to wind up the session. And thank you, everyone, for joining in. And I have launched out a poll regarding your feedback for today's webinar. Please select how the webinar was for you. And thank you, Samir, for taking your time out and giving us the knowledge and how native advertising works. And thank you, everyone, for joining into the session. We'll see you next week with another webinar.
Thanks, Divya, and thank you everyone, not only for coming and joining in. I'm sure it's a busy time for each one of you, but I really appreciate so many of you asking questions. And I'm sincerely apologetic for the questions I could not answer or where there was a voice problem. So maybe that we catch up very soon in a different webinar. Right, guys, you have a great weekend then.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye then.